I guess with that, we could, it's a little bit after 7:30 and we could begin our telescope clinic.
Is that my cue?
Yes. Hi, John. Yes.
So whoever started the recording, thank you. Who is recording?
I am.
Oh, good.
I wanted to start it sooner, but I don't think we need to put our announcements up on YouTube probably.
Yep.
All right. So I am going to share my screen. So bear with me while I try to click. I can't talk and click at the same time. So you should see my desktop now.
Yep.
Wow.
And you should see my first slide.
Mm-hmm.
Telescope clinic. And can everybody see my mouse?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So normally we obviously do this in person at Space Place, and we invite people to bring their actual telescopes and we help them debug problems, and sometimes we even do minor repairs, and we teach people how to use the equipment that they already own. And obviously we can't do that because of the pandemic, but for the second year in a row, we're going to do this clinic virtually. And what we're going to do is I am going to give a very short and sweet presentation, just talking about some issues that you need to confront when you want to buy a telescope. And then we're going to stop the formal presentation and we're going to just do Q&A. Hopefully some people brought some questions with them tonight. We are prepared to create one breakout room. So we're going to have two separate threads. The breakout room will specialize in astrophotography and questions related to that discipline. And you'll be able to join that if you want to. If you stay in this room where we are right now, it's just going to be general Q&A about telescope purchases, what you need to think about, that kind of thing. So with that in mind, I'm going to kick off this short presentation. But first, I wanted to do a quick update on the MAS History Project. Many of you are aware that for the past almost 2 years now, we've been working on a comprehensive history of the club. And I just wanted to update you on that, because the last time we talked about this at a meeting formally was June of last year. So it's been a year and a half since we've really addressed this with the whole group. So I wanted just to start out by saying the project began in March of 2020. And for that whole first year, it was really the first year of COVID, because March of 2020 is when the shutdown started. We spent that first year doing the research part of it, gathering information, and really collecting a huge pile of documentation from both newspaper sources and from sources within the club and elsewhere. And I want to give a special shout out to Dan Strom. Dan is here tonight. Dan was really just super key in that research effort. Dan has a knack for taking large piles of information and bringing some organization to it. He created a number of Google documents to give some structure to just the mass of material that we gathered. In addition to Dan, Jürgen was also instrumental. Kevin Santoulis played a big role, and I was involved in the research gathering. So again, that first year was really gathering a lot of that information and really being quite pleasantly surprised at how much information we had. Since March of this year, we've been writing. And when I say we, I mean primarily me. I've been doing the writing part of this, gathering that information and starting to actually create a document, the history document. So that's been happening now for about the past, 8 or 9 months, something like that. And in addition to that, reading and editing help. I want to give a special thanks to both Eric Feedy, and I don't know if Eric is here tonight, I didn't see him come in, and Rita Hampton. Eric has been in the club for a long time and has a good view of the last 55 or 60 years of the club, pretty close. And Eric has a lot of a good insight. So he's been a reader for me, and he's patient, and he'll keep on reading and rereading as I keep on revising things. And then Rita has been a wonderful editor. And I do want to give a special recognition to what Rita has done, because everybody who writes needs to have a person who has one of these and is not afraid to use it. And I mean, seriously, with this red pen, Rita not only does spelling and typographical error correction, she checks grammar, she does all the stuff that you would expect a reader or an editor to do, but Rita also will circle entire paragraphs and put question marks in the margin and then write, I have no idea what you're trying to say here. And it sends me back to the paragraph to take a fresh look and rewrite it. And I've rewritten things until Rita really can follow the narrative and understand it. And it's a much, much better document for it. And I do mean we have a document now. We have a draft of the history. This is just a draft, but you can see that we've got a title. We've even got a footnote there on the first page. The part one, the first 50 years may not stand. It still depends on which direction we go with it. But the first section will probably take us right up to 1985 and the founding of the Yana Research Station. And it really is a document. We've got multiple pages. And along the way, we've discovered a lot of great stuff about the club, great stories like Project Moonwatch. A lot of the old timers in the club remember Project Moonwatch, or at least heard about it. It was a big thing back in the 50s and 60s. It was, in fact, probably the first true citizen science project on a very, very large scale. And MAS was very, very involved in Project Moonwatch for about 6 or 7 years in the late 50s and early 60s. The document right now is pushing 45 pages, something like 25,000 words, 26,000 words. And if you want to take a look at it, if you're interested in reading what we've got, it is available on our website. So do check out the work for the history. Coming up in the next few months, we're going to devote another full meeting to a presentation about club history because it is really that interesting. But let's get to tonight's topic. The Telescope Clinic, we do it every December. It's kind of a holiday thing because we think people might be out there thinking about buying telescopes for themselves, for a loved one, or maybe you already have one. Maybe you got it for the holidays, or maybe it's been gathering dust in the closet for a couple of years because you don't know how to use it, or maybe it's broken. So we try to fix some of those problems tonight. For this brief presentation though tonight, I'm actually going to take an anti-telescope stance because I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes trying to talk you out of buying a telescope if you're inclined to think about it. Now, we do want you to buy a telescope if you really want one, but I want you to really consider the alternatives, and the main alternative that I think is a good one. But if you're thinking about buying a telescope, let's start there. In Madison, a couple of years ago, several years ago, all you had to do was go to Eagle Optics in Middleton because they were one of the best resellers or retailers of telescopes in the country. Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore. Eagle Optics closed a few years ago and is now out of business entirely. They've shifted, they've kind of changed into a new form. They are now Vortex Optics, and they don't sell telescopes. So if you want to buy a telescope today, you do what everybody does. You go online. And there are a bunch of places, there are dozens of places online that will sell you a telescope. But I want to focus on just a couple of them. So 3 examples here. OPT stands for Oceanside Photo and Telescopes. Orion Telescopes is probably one of the biggest and best known. They have the telescope.com coveted URL, and then Astronomical. So these are just 3 of the many that are out there, but I want to focus on OPT for no other reason than I just want to give you an example of what you can see, what you can find on a website. So this is OPT's website as of this week. I just went the other day and grabbed a couple of screen grabs, and you can see a typical holiday spread. There's a lot of stuff that you can get at OPT. And if you are confused and need help, you can also call their 800 number, and there will be a knowledgeable person on the phone to answer your questions and help you sort through all the buying decisions that you might need to make. They've got a bunch of different articles and tips pages on the site. Here's one for astrophotography, and their stuff is really good. I've looked at a lot of their help pages. The things that you see lined up here, look, menus. Each one of those menus does produce a drop down. Here's what the accessories drop down looks like, and it just gives you a flavor for all the different things that you can buy at OPT or at any of the others, software, collimation tools, Barlow's, Eyepieces, everything that you could need is there. Great article, if you have a budget of $300, the 10 best telescopes under $300. So OPT is a good place to start if you want to buy online. Another good recommendation that I have is a website that I like, and I know a lot of other MAS members have used it. It's called cloudynights.com. Cloudy Nights is a great astronomy website with a lot to offer. So I'll go into the Cloudy Nights website. This is their landing page as of a few days ago. One of the things that I really like about Cloudy Nights is the forums. Forums are message boards. If you click on that, it takes you to their message board page. And this page scrolls down on and on and on. Topics about just about anything you can imagine. And so you can see like the beginners forum right here has 33,000 different topics and over 500,000 messages as of a couple of days ago. If you have a question, use their search feature, because odds are the question has already been asked several times, and you can scroll through all the answers. And you can then post a new question yourself if you couldn't find something. But they have forum topics to address just about anything you can imagine. The forums are a great source of information. Back to the main page, they also have a section on articles and reviews. So you click on that and it takes you to their main review landing page. Let's say you take a look at that iStar Optical's Phantom FCL telescope. They've got a review. So you click on the review and it takes you to a review of this telescope written by an amateur astronomer. This review goes on for about 6 or 7 pages, scrolling pages. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, then there are user comments. People will post their comments or their questions or their own experiences. So again, Cloudy Nights it's just a great resource if you're thinking about making a purchase from an inexpensive eyepiece to the most expensive camera or telescope. Cloudy Nights will have good advice. I will point out also that Cloudy Nights is owned by Astronomics. Astronomics acquired this website probably going on 15 years ago now or something like that. So it is a subsidiary of one of the commercial websites that I just told you about, but it remains really good. The other thing that I'll say about making a purchase online is, in addition to these options, you might want to consider buying a used piece of equipment. And all the usual suspects are in play. You can buy telescopes and eyepieces and everything else on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, or Craigslist. But the usual caveat applies. Beware when you're buying used equipment, because there are scams out there. It is possible to get ripped off. If you're not experienced in buying used things on the internet, you might want to consult with somebody who has a little bit of experience before you actually try to make a purchase. I have bought a lot of used equipment online, and I'm a big fan. You might be too. You can also, as a purchaser, you can think about buying a variety of astronomy books. Obviously, there are thousands of astronomy books out there. Here are 3 relatively, not recent ones in all cases. Turn Left at Orion is pretty old, but all of these books are outstanding sources for learning new things about your hobby. We highly recommend shopping books. Back to the telescope question. If you're still thinking about buying a telescope, here's the point where I try to talk you out of it, because binoculars are a great astronomy tool. And I'm a big fan of binoculars as a viable option, especially if your budget is limited. For instance, if you've only got about $300 to spend, there aren't a whole lot of telescopes that are going to make you really happy at the $300 price point, especially because you won't be spending the full $300 on the telescope. You're going to have to save some of that money for the accessories that you'll need. So I urge you to consider binoculars. Just this week, I did a search and found this pair of Nikons, Nikon Aculon A211 on Amazon for $163. This is a really decent pair of binoculars. I didn't own this exact pair, but I owned a similar pair. This is a zoom. So with this little lever up here, you can actually zoom the magnification from 10 power up to 22 power with a 50mm aperture. These are really decent binoculars for the price. And another thing that I like about them is they come with some accessories, including this adapter. If you don't know what that is, I'll get to that in just a second. So let's say you follow my advice with your $300 budget and you buy this $163 binocular. You can still afford to buy one of those books. You can even afford to buy a planisphere to help you learn the constellations and learn the sky. And you can even buy yourself a comfortable observing chair from REI or LL Bean. And if you are lucky enough to find that observing chair on sale, save yourself a little bit of money, you can buy all this within your budget at under $300. Or you can skip those 3 accessories and buy a decent tripod and put your binoculars on a tripod. That's where that adapter will come in handy, because you need an adapter to mount your binoculars on a tripod. And remember, this pair of Nikons comes with that adapter. So I hope that you'll consider binoculars, because even people like us who own telescopes, most of us have binoculars not far away while we're using our telescopes. Finally, just one other variable that I'll put before you. Another thing to consider when you're observing is how long it takes to set things up. So I have 3 different ways that I primarily observe: with my 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain, or with my wide field cameras, or with my binoculars. And so I just thought I'd do a quick comparison of the setup time. If I'm setting up my telescope, it takes me about 45 to 60 minutes to get everything set up from when I carry it out of the house or unload it from the car. 45, 60 minutes until I can be observing. With my cameras, about 25 minutes to get things set up and be in operation. With binoculars, 2 minutes. Walk out the door, take them out of the case, and you're observing. Binoculars are an awfully good tool to have at hand. And if your budget's limited, I think it's a great place to start your astronomy journey. The other thing I would say is stay in touch with us. The Madison Astronomical Society is a great club to belong to and to visit if you have questions, if you have things that you're interested in doing and you want to talk to other people about their experience. In pandemic times when we don't get together in person, take a look at our Facebook page. MAS has about 130 members. Our Facebook page has almost 600 members at last count, and it's a pretty active group. If you ask a question on our Facebook page, people are going to answer you. People are going to give you ideas. So check us out. That's it. I am going to stop.
We're just kind of kicking off the questions, acknowledging first that we've got several experienced astrophotographers in the room who do a wide variety of astrophotography. And we have a lot of folks in here, I think, who have some questions. So who would like to kick things off? That's mainly what we're here to do, is just kind of explore what your interests and questions are and see what we can do to give you some guidance or help or point you in certain directions. So feel free to unmute and we can just have a conversation.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a quick comment. Since I jumped in here, it looks like I'm recording this room now. So I don't know if anybody's recording the other main room, and going on the participants tab, I don't think I have any way of contacting John. I'll just sit and try to figure that out for a moment.
So I know the Rankins had some questions. There's some other folks here who maybe had questions or wanted some insights. How can we help? What can we do for you?
Yeah, hi. Well, we'll just jump in and get things started.
Sure.
First, I have to mention to Dan Hislop, your uncle used to work for our department.
Yeah, he's retired now, isn't he?
Yeah, indeed, he's retired. We actually give a Doug Hislop Award for the most, scholarly undergraduate student. So
Cool.
Anyway, a little connection there. So
he was a very scholarly undergraduate student, because he was an undergraduate at Madison back when you could defer from the draft for unlimited credits. So he graduated with his, bachelor's degree with like 160 credits or something ridiculous like that. I think he kept going until they lifted the, or they added a limit to how much you could defer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he was a delight to work with, and so please give him my regards when you see him next.
Yeah, I'll probably see him at Christmas, so I'll do so.
Great, thanks. Well, let's see. This is my son Jackson. Jackson's in high school, and we have a. I'll just point towards it. Just this 8-inch, Dobsonian telescope. And Jackson's been interested, and we've had that for about 10 years now. And it's been a great scope for just, getting outside and checking things out. We live out well west of Madison, and pretty dark around here. And Jackson takes the scope up to local hilltops and stuff like that. And so we have a lot of fun looking at things. Jackson would like to take pictures of some things, and of course with the Dobsonian mount, it's pretty limited in what you can do and what light you can gather, and of course it doesn't track anything. But so he works at Menards and saved up some money, and Santa Claus may help complement the budget, but we need some guidance. If you hadn't noticed, you can spend a lot of money in this hobby, and we just need some kind of local knowledge, so to speak, to help us navigate through. I think, Jackson had looked at a different scope and a tracking system. So I think I'm going to do what, the non-soccer dad thing, and just kind of step aside and let Jackson kind of tell you a little bit about what his interests are and what maybe some of his homework has been, and maybe you can guide his thoughts or help us sort of connect the dots here. So so Jackson, maybe tell him a little bit about what you've been doing and what your thoughts are about next steps for hardware for astrophotography. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I've done quite a bit of research about astrophotography. It's really limited because all I can really do with our Dobsonian is just put my phone up to the lens. I've actually taken some pretty good photos of Orion's Nebula. I can see the Andromeda Galaxy, but I think my phone sensor's not sensitive enough to see Andromeda. But that's really the limit of this telescope right here. For last Christmas, I got this adapter to an old Sony DSLR. I haven't really figured that out quite yet, but I'll figure it out eventually. But really, I'm still going to use that camera for astrophotography, but really, well, my main concern is mount for astrophotography. If I decide to get a telescope and put it on a mount, and really the best one, as far as I can tell, is the Skywatcher Eqm35. But it's like you can't find it really anywhere now. I've heard it's just incredible for its price, and 22 pounds of telescope is really not bad for a mount. And I heard the tracking system is pretty good, but the go-to system is not. But that's what I've heard. Really, an option number 2, which I guess is the more risky, is Orion has a Skyview Pro Equatorial Mount. It's about $449, I think, and it comes with a tracking device. But the problem is that I don't really know how good that mount is, and I think it might be a good option if I really know what its limits are. And it supports 20 pounds of telescope, so not all that different from the Skywatcher. And the next concern is like telescope, because our Dobsonian, including the mount, is about 40 pounds or something. It's pretty heavy. And then there are like 3 types of telescopes. There's a refracting, and then there are 2 reflecting telescopes, the Newtonian and the Cassegrain. I just really don't know where to start in terms of which telescope should I choose. I understand that refracting telescopes are at a bit of a disadvantage because of the lens is getting more expensive the bigger you go, and it doesn't focus light in all the same places, except for like the apochromatic, I think.
Yeah, and one thing to jump in there, I think one of the easiest ways to jump in is start with some wide field imaging.
Okay.
And and you could even jump in with a cheap camera tracker. There are a number of people who just mount a camera on a tracker. I shouldn't say cheap, but well working. But compared to say buying a $10,000 or $15,000 Paramount, or even a very reliable mass-produced mount that'll still set you back in the $2,000 to $5,000 range. One way to get in there, and some of our, like Jeff has had some experience recently, and we've got John Rummel's got some experience with this, and also Carol Santoulis, if you ever bump into her in the club, where they just mount their camera on a tracking mount and get on a nice prime focus lens. And there's a lot of really neat stuff you can capture wide field. And you don't have to worry about the problem with some of these mounts that they're mass produced is, Madison Astronomical Society has one of these mounts. It's an old Celestron CGE Pro, and I have a mount myself that was made by Celestron. A lot of them are good copies, but occasionally you buy a mount that's of a product line and you get a bad copy. And I would sit and try to take 4 or 5 minute subs with this mount over an hour or more. And as soon as I get towards a certain spot in the sky, the mount would always stop tracking because it would always bind in that spot because all the parts didn't fit perfectly. So with these less expensive mounts can have a tendency to have some reproducibility issues as far as putting things together. So if you start, and I was running like an 11-inch Schmidt Cassegrain telescope, and trying to work at a very long focal length, where any problem like that would totally ruin my pictures, and I couldn't get accurate tracking and I couldn't get stable mounting. So if you start at the opposite end with, say, a camera with just a prime focus lens, or say get yourself for like around $1,000, get yourself a high quality doublet or triplet refractor with an 80 millimeter aperture, and say 0.5 meter of focal length at f6, f7, it's gonna be a lot easier for you to get the ball rolling. And there are a lot of great objects like that refractor I'm telling you about, that 80 millimeter refractor. It has a little bit too much focal length to capture the entire Andromeda Galaxy. So if you're looking that route, you want to start with a smaller prime focus lens on a much simpler system. Jeff,
Yeah, Jackson, actually, I wanted to ask you a couple of follow-up questions. One, it sounds like your main interest is taking pictures of what are called deep sky objects, so nebula, galaxies. Is planetary and lunar not something that you're terribly interested in?
I would certainly like to take pictures of planets. I've actually never seen Neptune, Pluto, or Uranus, or any of the deeper planetary objects. That is something I would like to do.
But your main interest seems to be what we call the faint fuzzies.
My main interest is
okay. The reason I ask is because that actually will drive, your interest will actually drive the system that you might want to start with. And I think Lawrence's points are really good, that given your budget, sounds like you're looking at around $500 for a mount, and then maybe the same kind of ballpark, maybe a little more for the telescope. Using the camera you've got and getting a decent lens could be what's called a zoom lens, 70 to 200 millimeter or 70 to 300 millimeter, give you a lot of flexibility to do wide field astrophotography, which is really, really cool. But also conceivably, there are ways that you can push that to do, some interesting shots of the moon and things like that. that 80 millimeter refractor idea would be a really, really good starting point. You could do a lot of astronomy and astrophotography for a long time with an 80 millimeter refractor and a DSLR attached to it. The thing to think about getting into astrophotography like you are now is to not worry too much about taking long exposures, because the software these days is so good. What you can do is take a lot of short exposures, and then the problems that you may have with your mount actually get really reduced, and you can retain a lot of subs and add up a whole bunch of signal in order to get a really nice looking final product. So, you know, like many of us here who do astrophotography of deep sky objects are shooting 5-10 minute exposures, and we're getting 25 of those. Don't worry about that to start with. You know, think about taking a minute exposure, but a lot of them, and then you'll be able to get some really, really amazing deep sky images with particularly something like that 80 millimeter refractor or a good camera lens attached to your DSLR. The mount's important, but starting out, kind of, especially with lower focal length, so it's very forgiving. So you can have a mount that's not the best thing in the world and still get great results. I did that for a very long time, I guarantee. And yeah, you have to throw out some subs because you had a jiggle in the mount, but you get to keep enough to be able to get a good image by the, you know, at the end of the session. So those are a few ideas. I think the refractor path, given your interest, the wide field refractor, or thinking about getting a nice zoom lens, not like what's called an entry or a kit lens, but maybe 1 or 2 steps up. You know, quality, you want to get quality glass so you don't get frustrated by the data that you're capturing. It's an investment. You'll use that forever, by the way. If you get a quality glass and you stick with Sony, you'll keep using that camera lens for a long time. So you got some nice options that I think would be in yours and Santa's price point. And we'll get you into it, and you'll be able to get, you know, go for a while before you start getting that itch where you're thinking, wow, I want to do more things, and then you have to start saving your money up again, thinking about getting something bigger or better, you know, that kind of a thing.
One option you might think about, kind of following up on Jeff's, is if you want to try out a longer focal length lens, there's a place on the west side called the Camera Company, and they will lend you lenses for maybe $15, $20, $30. I went there when I wanted to do the solar eclipse a few years ago, right? And I just rented their 300 millimeter lens for a couple days for like $30. And at least you get to kind of get an idea of what it's like, and, you know, before you invest your money, you can try it out.
If you're, a couple of comments here. I missed the beginning, so I'm going a little bit in the dark here, but still, you're certain now, or you have strong ideas now about what you'd like to do. When I got into astronomy, my first telescope was a C8. And over time, I realized that it actually was too narrow field for me. I ended up getting, right now, my 3 telescopes, I've got an 85, a 92, and a 130 refractors. I went straight refractor. And one nice thing about doing the small refractor is you may be interested in astrophotography, but guess what? Astrophotography isn't all you're going to be using your telescope for. If you have friends who want to go outside and look at something, a grab-and-go telescope with a simple mount and a decent refractor takes you 5 minutes to set up at the most, if you're clumsy. And after that, it's knowing the sky to go and look for what you want to look at. Now, obviously, you're not going to see things that you'd get out of Hubble photographs, and not anything that you get with time exposures with your camera through a bigger telescope. But that's a great way to start. It also helps you find out whether or not that's really what your interest is. If you are unhappy with the small stuff, then you can graduate to a larger scope, which is always a little bit more clumsy to deal with. It's heavier, you need bigger mounts, the whole bit. So starting with a refractor, I think, is a really great idea. Now, I happen to be a refractor bigot, I know that, but still, I think it's a good place to start, and you'll always find use for it. The other thing is, you seem to want to do astrophotography, but if you're going to do anything else, probably the most important thing to invest in are decent eyepieces, a couple of good ones. Because guess what? If you take a look at people who've been in astronomy in amateur astronomy for a long time, they end up turning over their equipment. But the one thing that survives are eyepieces. You buy an 1.25" eyepiece for your 80mm telescope, it'll also work on a C8 or bigger, and a 2" eyepiece also. So starting with a refractor, I'm channeling Jeff here, is really not a bad idea at all to get you started. And you could also find out you just have a 35mm camera now, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, you have right, replaceable lens camera. You can also, if you're interested in doing planetary astronomy, you can actually buy fairly inexpensive dedicated cameras to do that. They're actually called planetary cameras. They're also called autoguider cameras, but they're relatively inexpensive, and you can do good photography with that. And the thing is that the field of view is small enough that what you really get is the planet and not a lot of background where you have to, so.
Yeah, the downside with planetary imaging is, in addition to a lack of really still air conditions and good seeing conditions in Wisconsin, and when you want to image a planet, say like Jupiter, you want it to be at opposition when it's at its closest, so there's a narrow window, and then that's when you really need a stable mount, and there's money, and then you need more focal length, and there's money, and then how much time do you want to spend polar aligning your telescope? Whereas if you stick with a smaller refractor, you don't have to be so fine with your polar alignment.
And the other
is polar aligning a term you're familiar with? There, is everybody familiar with?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
The other comment I just wanted to make, Jeff mentioned taking multiple exposures. One thing people do is they simply buy video cameras. I mean, that's really what you're talking about here. You end up taking, in a short period of time, many, many exposures. It's like having a video camera. And then you have software that automatically merges all this stuff together. So how adept are you at using computers?
I would say I'm above average.
In that case, astrophotography and the tools you find out there, a lot of which are free, is going to be right down your alley.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
You'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the fun thing about video cameras is those have, unlike your regular cameras with an APC sensor, big APC or full frame sensor, some of these video cameras have very small video sensors, and you can get these aggressive focal reducers that will take a refracting telescope that might be f7 or f8, and you can chop that down to f4. So instead of taking 3 or 4 or 5 minute exposures, you can be taking 30-second or 60-second exposures, and then you're reducing your time tinkering with polar alignment and other technical issues too.
I apologize, I have to run, but Jackson, I'm leaving you in good hands. You got good, knowledgeable folks here. Nice to see you. I can't wait to hear what you end up getting and seeing your first images. So best wishes on that.
Yeah,
see y'all. See everybody.
See you, Jack.
See you, Jeff. I'd like to jump in quick and continue kind of down this thread about 80mm refractors. There's a bunch of us of a certain age, and I think was getting at this, who bought Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope as our first telescope and had just an awful experience, because there was a time in the 90s where these were starting to be mass produced with electronics, part of the kind of the miniaturization revolution. And the thing is, the field of view is so small and the magnification is so great that there is zero margin of error, and that makes for a very frustrating learning project. And when you look up in the sky, a lot of beginners think that we use telescopes because things are being very far away, they're very small, and we need to magnify. And that's true for a lot of objects, but really there's a whole lot of stuff in the sky that's actually very big. It's just really dim. And we're using the telescopes to gather lots of light to make them brighter but not necessarily that much bigger. If you look at the Andromeda Galaxy, which is one of the most amazing things in the night sky, it's actually bigger than the full moon. It's just so dim that you can't see it naked eye except from the darkest places. And even under a good telescope, it just looks like a gray smudge. But it's actually a very easy beginner object with an 80mm refractor. And that's one of the reasons, and there are dozens and dozens of things in the sky that are kind of easy. You know, Orion Nebula in the winter, the Pleiades, the Rosette Nebula. These are all very big, bright things that are going to be really easy, spectacular targets for an 80mm refractor. And just to put a price tag on for a doublet, you're looking at, the last time I looked, at least about $500, or for an APO triplet, about $1,000 for an 80mm refractor. I got a triplet off that was used off of eBay for maybe $750 or $800 before the eclipse a few years ago. And it's a lot easier. The other thing is the modern equatorial mounts. They're kind of the German style as opposed to the fork mounts that Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope come in. They come with a polar scope built in along the RA axis, and it makes it really easy to polar align. So that's another thing you get in your favor. One last thing I want to tell you is one thing to be aware of as a consumer is most telescopes and mounts that are made under this, take the Skywatcher brand, the Celestron brand, and the Orion brand, are all made by one company in China called Sinta, and they're just basically white labeled for these different companies. And so if you look closely, you'll find that the mechanicals are mostly the same, and what differs is usually, you know, the color and, you know, sometimes some outer decorative pieces. So that's my piece.
No, thank you, everybody. I don't want to monopolize. I know there are probably other people on the call, but this is Santa speaking, however. So I'm wondering if one of you could maybe, even in the chat, maybe point us to a couple of good 80 refractor options that might be good candidates for us to consider. If that's a fair request, maybe we'll let the other people on the call have their chance at your knowledge as well. So
let me make one comment about that. I don't know, it sounds like you're trying to make a Christmas present, but if you want to take a little bit of time doing a bit of research, there is a YouTube channel by a man named Ed Ting, T-I-N-G, who does a lot of reviews. And sometimes it's hard to actually figure out where to find them. But he has done reviews on short refractors and inexpensive telescopes and things like that. He also has an online website, which is in many ways a lot easier to read because it's just a list of the things he's reviewing. And a lot of his newer reviews nowadays actually just point at his YouTube channel. So you might want to take a look at that. And he's kind of opinionated. He's got a slightly irreverent way of speaking, but he has some really good information out there. And the other thing, following up on what Dan said about Andromeda, I realized that my C8 was not what I wanted when I tried to look for Andromeda. And I couldn't find it. And I knew I was pointing in the right place. And only later, when I sat down and actually did a little bit of arithmetic, remember arithmetic? I found out I was looking at the core of Andromeda with my C8. I couldn't get anything wider than that with the eyepiece I had.
Yeah.
So you find spectacular things out there with wide field telescopes. And, well, I will be very interested to see what you end up buying.
I was going to suggest on Andromeda that you probably can just fit it in the picture if you have a crop sensor with a 200 or 300 millimeter telephoto on it. It'll almost fill the picture up.
Yeah, I agree with that because my 480 millimeter refractor, it doesn't quite have enough field of view to fit it all in. And there's a number of really neat objects in the sky where that refractor is a little too bit long in focal length.
Actually, there's a good program if you haven't encountered it called Sky Safari, where you can put in like with this telescope and this lens and this camera, what would my field of view be? And you can pretty much point it around the sky and get a really good sense of what you can see. And I think everybody is kind of echoing the idea of a refractor. One of the really nice features of refractors is they also have a lot of flexibility in that they'll come with some native focal length, which will kind of control the magnification, but you can also get an extender or a Barlow that increases the magnification, and you can get what's called a compressor that will decrease the magnification. So you're always kind of tuning off brightness and size, right? Magnification and brightness. And with the refractor, you have a lot of tunability in how you do that.
Yeah, and that term he used some of the astrophotographers frequently refer to focal reducers, as well as addition to focal extenders, where your focal reducers reduce your magnification, but they decrease your exposure time. And then extenders will increase your magnification, but increase your exposure time that you need.
Sky Safari, by the way, runs on iPhone and iPad, and it's nice and inexpensive, courtesy of Apple Store. It's a nice
You can
program.
also get that field of view off of Telescopius, and you can also get it off of Stellarium. They both have the ability to show you what you'll see with a different lens and a different camera.
All right. Well, this sounds great. I have a lot to think about. How far would you say I could push that 80mm refractor?
You mean magnification wise?
Well, well, say I wanted to take a photo of a really dim deep space object. How well could it do that?
Well, you know, as
Depends
John
what
was saying,
shot
what
you
you
got.
end up doing is having a mount, and you take subframes. Those subframes might be anywhere from 30 seconds to several minutes, and then you just stack as many of those as you need, right? There's, you know, it can be 100, right? And the beauty of that is if your mount screws up or there's a little wind and it blows it around, then you just throw out some frames. So the improvements in photographic cameras have kind of made it almost an equalization between like your Dobsonian, which has a pretty big aperture, so it gathers a lot of light, and a refractor is going to gather less light, but you kind of make up for it when you do photography because the camera can be more sensitive than your eyes are, and you can average over a long period of time.
Part of it is how much patience you have. I mean, if you're going out and you're going to be out in the middle of the night for 4 hours and doing photography, you're going to gather a hell of a lot more photons with a big telescope than you are with a little one. So that's kind of the limit on how pushy you can get, is how much wall clock time are you going to spend doing this?
Yeah, and then the other thing you have to think, because you can capture the dimmest objects you want as long as you increase your exposure time or increase your subframes for the overall exposure time. But then you also have to think on the back end, how much time do you want to spend processing images and calibrating images? So in some ways, you know, a one-shot camera with a prime focus lens or doing brighter objects with any kind of telescope are going to save you a lot of that processing time. And I think for me, one of the things that I haven't done any astrophotography in a couple of years, and one of the things is especially with the planetary imaging and processing, it was just taking up too much of my time. The processing was.
Yeah,
something
I think with if you're talking about dim stuff, you're going to run into the limits of the mount because your sub exposures are going to have to be longer, and you're going to find out that you're throwing more of them out because of the little imperfections in the worm gears of the mount. And so what's going to happen is as you move to more dim stuff, you're going to have to add auto guiding to compensate for that, or go up to, you know, more expensive mounts. But I think the mounts that you're looking at in the kind of $500 or $600 range are going to be good enough for this bright stuff. And there's a lot of bright stuff that you can, you'll be able to post on Instagram and impress all the girls with before you need to worry about the dim stuff.
Yeah, those bigger, brighter objects, those will keep you busy a long time.
The other thing is when you start getting into the astrophotography, people have been talking about 5-minute subs, 20-minute subs, 30-second subs. That's going to be a fun part of your learning experience, is figuring out how long your sub exposure should end up being. So you're going to have a little bit of experimentation to figure out the right thing for your setup.
Yeah, and to also go back to what Lawrence was saying about processing, this is really kind of a two-prong hobby. There's going out and acquiring the data on the camera and the telescope, and then there's taking it back to your computer and playing with it, the data, until you get what you want. And different people have different tolerances for, both of those things. Some people don't like telescopes at all and will still be playing around with data they took years ago, or will be playing around with data in Photoshop or in these stacking programs that they downloaded from somebody else, or even NASA off the internet. And I'm really interested in that. Other people, they want to go out and they want to get the image from the telescope, but they have, very little patience for processing. And it's a compromise, and it all kind of, it's where you want to spend your time.
Now, I almost forgot, there is another option that's completely a different paradigm. And a couple of years ago, we had a presentation at one of our meetings from some Madison Memorial High School students. Their approach was they got online and got in a certain network where they could actually reserve time on a professional telescope with a whole imaging rig on it. And that was how they were doing all of their imaging. And then they would download all the images that they captured on the professional equipment, and then they would process it at home. And that, I mean, that's a great option. If I would have to check with the planetarium director, Jeff Holt, over at Madison Memorial, about how they got hooked up with that. But it was a really neat presentation that they did.
That's no fun though. No mosquito bites, no frostbite toes.
Yeah.
No tinkering with equipment and pulling
No
it out
tinkering.
because you can't get your auto guider to work the way you want, or your mount, the gears in your mount has too much slack and you can't get it to quite track accurately. So you spend some time figuring out, if I add weight to this end of the mount, it won't do that. Yeah. And then, then the night's over. So
really, we're recommending the 80mm refractor for you, because there's a lot you can do with very little tinkering and very little trial and error. You'll be getting pretty good results quickly without a lot of work.
And I just getting something and working with it. I mean, I think most people end up, their first telescope is not their last telescope if they find they like the hobby. And the first telescope will tell you whether or not you really do like the hobby. Mm-hmm. And the other thing here is the people who do superb astrophotography usually end up using monochrome cameras with filter wheels. And everything we've been talking about here, well, you'd multiply that by about 5 or 6 when you get into that.
Oh,
so this is the type of hobby that can consume your life if you let it. And also, if you're a perfectionist, be prepared to be disappointed.
And don't forget the other option. You get a camera that is a camera, what we call a camera tracker, where it's a tripod that you put. You take your camera, you put it on a tripod, but the tripod has a sky tracker that points at the North Pole, and then you just take your 200mm prime focus or 100mm lens, or even get a great shot of the Orion Nebula and the Barnard Loop, the very large nebula around Orion, using a 50mm pancake lens. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do just with cameras and lenses and not even worry about telescopes.
Yeah. And if you do go that route, one thing to be aware of is you can get older lenses for cheap. If they're used, if they don't have autofocus, you don't need autofocus. If you're taking a picture of the sky, you can just set the focus to, infinity, And so you can get a lens, from 1990 off of eBay, and it's gonna work just as well for that as like I just bought a 500 millimeter zoom lens about a year ago for my Sony APS-C system, and it cost about $1,000.
Okay. I actually have downloaded a software called Registax on my computer.
Oh, yeah.
That's the right one.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've played around with it. I took a couple of moon shots just with my phone, putting it up to a 28 millimeter lens. I've gotten some surprisingly good results with just putting my phone up to the lens and putting it on my computer. Like I actually built my own computer, and it's pretty dang powerful. It's more powerful than probably the average computer. But I wonder if that would affect processing time terribly. Say I have a bunch of photos that I need to process very quickly. Say they need to. Say I want to take a picture of a nebula, and I take a bunch of pictures of the nebula. How long do you think it would take for me to process them? Is it more CPU dependent or GPU dependent?
It's mostly CPU cores. If you
Okay.
have a 6-core CPU, stacking software should be able to use all of them to go a bit faster. The most important things are CPU cores, core performance, obviously, and RAM.
Okay. Yeah, I have
Well-
a
But
pretty
still, depending on how many subs you have and how big they are, it might still take an hour or two for it to process before you can sit down and start playing with the levels and stretching and things like that.
Okay.
So it's not,
I do have 6 cores and 12 threads. And I do have about 32 gigs of RAM. So
Okay.
it should be
You got
plenty.
plenty. Yeah.
How much
Where are you gonna
mass
s-
storage do you have?
What?
How much mass storage do you have?
I think about about 1.25 terabytes.
You might need to increase that.
Yes, you
eventually.
might.
And that's the main concern. You can always let things process. I've got an iMac that's like, almost 10 coming on 10 years old, and I use PICs inside, and I soldier on fine with it. But my main issue is I like having my 4 terabyte hard drive that I have in a RAID. So there, I get a duplicate of everything, and all my raw files go right in there.
Yeah. What I do on my system is I have SSD that I will work from. I think it's 2 terabytes now. And then I've got a 5 terabyte hard disk for storage, and I will do all my processing on the SSD and then move things over when I'm done processing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of intermediate files that get
That get
done,
called out too
and,
when you're done.
you end up having to take like you end up taking the thing you really want to image, and then you have to take a dark where you cover it up and basically are measuring the detector noise, and then you have to do flats where you measure like just what do you see when you see a flat field. So it kind of compensates for the fact your telescope sensitivity isn't the same in the center as the edge. So that's kind of what actually, in my experience, what makes the processing long is kind of keeping track of all these different kinds of files that you need, because you need at least 4 kinds of files to really do what people call calibrating it, where you get rid of like variations in the background and other things.
Mm-hmm.
But your
And
computer should be able
whenever
to
you
handle.
end up with, at some point, you probably remember astrophotography is not a science, it's an art. And you're
Yeah.
probably going to want to start shifting levels and compensating and doing all sorts of funky things in Photoshop or your editor du jour. And you'll end up with multiple copies. And if your images are, say, 30 megabytes or something like that, I'm sorry, pick a size, you're going to end up with multiple copies, and you do a lot of photography, and you use up mass storage like it's going out of business.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of my projects for the Cocoon Nebula, and that's on the higher end of like 1.1 gigabytes, full of light frames, dark frames, flat frames, and then other files and things.
So I should get a big fat HDD.
But
Yeah,
but on the
you don't need to rush out.
yeah,
No.
and on the other hand, I've been at this for several years, and my 4 terabyte RAID drive has still got plenty of room on it. So
Okay, so I
But
should
the
probably
S-
focus
the-
on like 2 terabytes, 1 or 2 terabytes. Okay.
But the SSD is a good idea.
Yeah,
for
the
your-
only problem is that SSDs are like 4 times more expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you get
Well,
a
you
small
just-
SSD.
just
Get
get
a
a
small
small one.
SSD for your work.
yeah,
Okay.
Just use it while you're processing, and
Yeah,
then
my-
move it when you're done with it and you're happy. You can move the files over to the HDD. That's what I do.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
and
My SSD is just my Windows install, my Steam library, and some apps I use all the time for that, and then files I don't need to use very often, I'll get moved over to the HDD.
yeah, that's what I do when I'm actively working on a project. I move that over to my computer's main hard drive, which is the solid state, and then all the other stuff that I'm not working on stays on the slower external hard drives.
So this has been a really awesome bit of counsel for Jackson and his work. But aside from waiting until Christmas again next year, like, is there a how can we get help like more more routinely? I guess is that like a monthly meeting that you have, or like how can we
There's
get
a-
more mentorship sort of a thing?
The club has a, if you sign up as an observer, there's a mailing list of all the people, like when you join the society, I think you pay what is another $10 or something like that to be an observer. And part of that is you get on a mailing list where you can simply post questions to everybody who is an observer, which is a fraction of the total society membership. I think that's a very good way of getting information. And then cloudy nights, also the forums on cloudy nights are really good. And you'll get a diversity of opinions, of course, but maybe you want that diversity of opinions so that at least what your options are.
Yeah.
And that's free.
And also the club's Facebook group too. People that are doing astrophotography on there, putting their stuff up and asking questions there too.
Yeah.
You're not a member
And the
now, is
monthly
that correct?
meetings.
In some cases, I think we're so new at this, we don't even know what questions to ask, if that's a fair way to characterize our
Oh, yeah.
position and such. So I guess it's a matter of just sort of maturation on the subject though.
Are you a member of the club yet or not?
No, I sent an email a couple of weeks ago,
Okay.
I think I stumbled onto this. I was looking at, clubs in the area. There's a Wisconsin state version, and then there are other versions like, there's a club in Milwaukee, there's a club in Madison. So I was just poking around online to get some local knowledge about what people do here in southern Wisconsin. So
I think
I'm
there's
the
a club
treasurer.
in Iowa County as well.
Yeah.
If you
I'm the
live west
treasurer.
of Madison.
yeah,
I'm the
we live in-
treasurer of the astronomy club, and the memberships come through me. And you're a student right now, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a junior at Middleton High School.
Okay. If you join just as a student, the membership is $5, and if you want to the observing privileges, as it's called, that's another $40. It's $45. And if your family wants to be a member, then there's a family membership that's $70 for observing privileges. But that means everybody in the family is also a member of the club or can participate. But if you want to do this individually, it'd be $45 for you. If you want to have the observing privileges.
Tell us what the observing privileges are again.
Lawrence?
Yeah, I can summarize that. Basically, we have, in a nutshell, per the bylaws, we have 2 levels of membership that you need to be aware of. One's the regular membership, and one's the observing membership. Now, the regular membership for adults, which is $30 a year, gives people, still gives the people, according to our observatory rules and the bylaws, the ability to use Yana Research Station and use the concrete pads and power outlets there, and also to use the privy. The observing level membership grants you access to all the buildings there and all the club owned equipment. So if you wanted to hop on one of the club owned mounts and put a telescope on it and
So where
put a
is the
camera
venue?
on it, that's what you could do.
Where is the observatory venue or?
Yeah, Yana Research Station is south of Brooklyn, just in kind of northern Greene County. So it's about a 40. I live in Madison by Hilldale Mall, and that it takes me about 40 minutes to get there one way.
All right, we live across Plains on the west side, and there's like tomorrow morning, if the weather clears, I'll go for a run, and I run by an observatory on Observatory Road. Is that an active venue at all?
Oh, that's Washburn Observatory, right?
No,
No.
is he talking in Cross Plains? Is he talking about Pine Bluff?
Pine Bluff. That's the university's observatory, and it's not active.
Okay.
Basically.
Okay.
And
But we can go down to your venue, and someone will be there to help us understand what that equipment is, and Jackson could use that and
Yeah, it'd be a matter of some hands-on training and things, or assisted. If someone like myself, I can run the Paramount, and so if someone like myself was down there who knew how to operate it, then we could just he could collect his data and I could show him how to operate the mount.
Yeah.
In normal times, sometimes it's good just to go and hang out with people who are observing and just get an idea of what do their scopes look like, what does the whole process look like, what kind of data do they get as it's coming in. Gives you a good idea of what it would be like if you have your own equipment.
Is that active during the winter?
Well, we don't. If there's snow on the ground, we don't plow out the driveway or anything there. So that's one thing. And then I once went out there in the middle of January to go see a triple transit of Jupiter and a comet, and I got my car stuck in the ditch because I drove off the driveway a little too far.
And let me also say, don't worry too much about being mentored on this. If you can assemble a computer, you can buy an 80mm refractor and an equatorial mount and watch a couple of YouTube videos and figure it out.
Yeah.
And
For the
ask
most
some
part, this
questions.
stuff isn't rocket science.
Like, I'm having trouble getting my go-to to work. I mean, some people struggle with that. Or I'm having
Practice
trouble
in your
to pull
yard.
online, and people will be around to answer your questions, and you get practice, and be patient. Don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good thing. We talk about going out to YRS, but YRS gives you is darker skies than you have in Madison. But if you're living at home, so you live in a house, which means you probably have a backyard. And a lot of people will learn by simply taking their telescope out the backyard, pointing at the sky and learning the equipment that way. That's by far the easiest way to do it. Is it worth a 45-minute drive out to YRS to join other people and take your telescope out there and learn it out there? I'm not really sure it is worth it. Go out to YRS and see what people are doing. But as Dan said, if you built your own computer, you can learn this stuff. It's not rocket science.
And the other thing is, if you are having problems with them, there's nothing more frustrating than driving 45 minutes to YRS and spending 3 hours getting nothing because something's not working. Set it up in the backyard a few times, get the mount tracking and working, and figure out how it works where you've got some patio lights and everything. And take some short exposures there, make sure you know how it works, and make sure everything's working before you worry about taking out to a dark sky to get better pictures.
Yeah, we have better snack food here too, I think.
Yeah.
And also learn how to deal with the controls in the dark.
Yeah.
Because white light at YRS is not a generally recommended thing.
Yeah. If you
So-
turn on a flashlight at YRS, you're
People
not
get
going to make
grumpy.
any friends.
If you thought, yeah, if you thought raccoons were grumpy.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, we really appreciate all the counsel. So we'll keep going down this path. And again, we really appreciate all your time and thoughts and counsel for us. That's been just awesome. So thank you so much.
Good luck, and we hope to see
Yeah.
more of you.
You're welcome. A pleasure meeting you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice to meet you all as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Got some other people who haven't asked questions, or maybe don't have questions. Maybe you're happy just to listen.
I have a question. I'm using a DSLR on a Eqm35 mount. It's a Eqm35. And I'm trying to use backyard EOS because I'm using a DSLR with a telephoto. I'm trying to plate solve. So I've downloaded ASTAP or ASTAP or OSTAP. I've heard it pronounced a bunch of ways. And CART-CL, and I'm trying to get all of that to talk to each other. Is that a good combination?
I use AstroTortilla, which is one of the free ones. You know, they all kind of are based on one large database that's publicly accessible, and the specific program you're using is just an interface to that. I don't have familiarity with that with backyard EOS. Does anyone else have?
I use exclusively backyard EOS for my Canon camera, and I love it. But I'm not interested in the plate solving part of it myself. So
I'm using a 600 millimeter telephoto, and I have a real problem getting the target in the field of view to do alignment. And I want to do plate solving, so I don't need to do a 2 or 3 star alignment.
Yeah, I'm comfortable just taking a preview shot at, I jack up the ISO and take a, let's take a 10-second preview shot, see where my object is in the screen, in wide field. And then I kind of see where it is relative to the bright stars. And then I'll just go in video mode and then try, do my adjustments based on the bright stars. And
that throws my focus off. If I focus at the zoom at one level and then try to zoom in on the target, I have to refocus.
Well, yeah, I don't know. The zooming that I'm talking about is a pixel zoom in backyard EOS. So that if I'm using a pixel zoom on it, I don't know if you do that, but I don't. Yeah, no, I don't change my focus at all.
I use the backyard EOS, but they said you could do plate solving with AstroTortilla, but they don't support AstroTortilla anymore.
Okay.
So they're recommending that everybody now go to ASTAP or ASTAP or whatever, and use CART-CL as your planetarium.
One option is, I personally got absolutely frustrated with trying to use my laptop for guiding and all of these things. And I have ordered one of the ASI Plus Wi-Fi computer hubs, which has plate solving built into it. I haven't used AstroTortilla or any of the other plate solving software, but what the ASI Plus gizmo does, ASI Air Plus, you basically plug it into your camera, and I know it works with Canon. You plug it into your guider, you plug it into your mount, and it basically bypasses all of your mount's software. It will polar align for you, because it will look through your camera if you set it to point at the pole, it will plate solve the pole area, and then you turn the RA mount and it will see the axis of rotation in the video, find the axis, or mark it on your phone screen, and then tell you which way to move your mount to polar align. And then you just basically go to from your phone or iPad or other Bluetooth device, and the thing will plate solve as it goes and find whatever object you like through the main camera. And so that's an option too, if you don't want to deal with all of the individual softwares and drivers on a laptop.
Yeah, I just figured out why I never worried about plate solving, because I've always used exclusively Celestron mounts, and they have a function in there called precise go-to, where if my calibration isn't giving me a precise pointing and I can't get my object, then I'll use a precise go-to where it'll find the next closest bright star to that object. You get that in your crosshairs,
You center it.
it'll do a very accurate slew, and then I'm never off by very much when I do that. So that's my story.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that that's a very important issue for a lot of people that use all sorts of different mounts to try to get a precise a slew like that.
Yeah, I'm also kind of lucky because I use a Sony. I have the focus peaking, so it's really trivially easy to get a good focus.
Yeah, it's one of the things I like about backyard EOS is it'll show you the peak. You know, when you're in focus and you're pointing at a bright star, it'll show you the width, you know, the peak width of your image, and you try to maximize the, you know, the pointiness, so to speak, of that peak.
Yeah. How the Sony does it is it actually in the electronic viewfinder, it will actually outline everything that's in focus with red. So, you know, during a regular daylight photography, as I'm adjusting the focus, you know, on a telephoto image, I can see, you know, the red band moving forward or backward in the field, you know, until it's right on the object I want to photograph. And it's night, it's cool because I changed the focus on the telescope focuser until all of a sudden everything, you know, every star just has a little red circle around it.
Well, that's
really
really
handy.
neat.
Which camera do you have, Dan?
I have actually a terribly obsolete, it was one of the first Sony mirrorless cameras, the Nex 7. And I've been trying to update, but Sony has been putting all of their effort into their full frame lines and not the APS-C mirrorless cameras, because professionals don't buy those and pay $2,000, $2,500 every year to upgrade their body when new features come out.
The second thing is there's a channel on YouTube by Ed Ting, T-I-N-G, who does a lot of reviews of telescopes. And some of the reviews or some of the stuff he deals with are very, very expensive, but he also deals with very inexpensive equipment. And there's a lot of information out there on his channel. He has a kind of an amusing way of talking about it also. He also has an online website where he does a lot of the same thing. And nowadays, a lot of his reviews actually point off to his YouTube channel. And the third thing, John, is that when you mentioned how long it takes to set up, if you've got a grab and go small a refractor, you can be set up in 5 minutes also.
Absolutely
Well,
true.
Yeah, I think it takes me, if we're just talking about setup, getting it out of the car and setting it up, if nobody's helping me, I can set up my 15-inch Dob in about 15 minutes. With help, that time triples.
One other comment about setup, and this is where binoculars will win, is if you are in a warm area and go outside into a cold area or vice versa, then the seeing you're going to get with your telescope may take a while to settle down. That's where binoculars actually can be very good. But refractors and reflectors both take a while for their mirrors and optics to stabilize at a temperature where you don't have obvious thermals that screw up your vision. So
I will mention, you were talking about Ed Ting, who I love and who I watch. There's a new channel on YouTube. It's called Old Gazer.
Oh,
and this is a older gentleman who I think he's down south somewhere, but his channel is aimed at very beginning astronomers. And he's going through all the parts of stargazing and equipment and everything in a lot of detail, to the point where for someone like me who have been doing it, I'm kind of like, well, I wish you'd get to the point. But I think if you're brand new, you would really get a lot out of him.
Look at you kids and your YouTube channels.
Well, you know, us youngsters, we got to do young things. Or
Oh,
is YouTube for the old guys now?
But you're both absolutely correct. As anybody knows, if you spent any time on YouTube, the amount of material on YouTube in any discipline is astounding, and astronomy is no different. And Ed Ting's channel and some other channels, one of our other members, Carol Santulis, is always pointing me at some YouTube reviews that she's seen to ask me what I think about them. And I'm just amazed at what you can learn and what you can see on YouTube. It's amazing.
Yes. I will mention that, like, one of the subjects that just came up today on one of the forums on Facebook I was following was cleaning your telescope mirror. You got to be really careful, and you might want to like talk to one of us, because there's a lot of bad information out there too.
Yeah. Or, you know, another, you know, tip, you know, a how-to, if you're like me, you've dropped your share of binoculars. Maybe you've dropped it on concrete or asphalt or rocks. And I've knocked some of my prisms out of alignment. And I used to have to send my binoculars out to have them repaired. Now, thanks to YouTube, a couple clicks, a little bit of searching, boom, here's how you repair your binoculars. And there's a lot of stuff that you can learn how to do like that on YouTube. It's amazing. Anybody else?
Are there any questions for starters?
I had a question. So I don't know, this might be kind of hard to answer, but just wondering if anyone had any experience with a smaller interpupillary distance for binoculars. A lot of the ones that I see, the minimum is like 62. And that's a little too big for me. And I can imagine for, you know, kids or others, you know, that might also be the case. I didn't know if they ran different sizes by brand, if anybody happens to have that experience.
I haven't looked into it, but I have a small head and a lazy eye, and it should be looked into, because I essentially use one half of my binoculars.
Yeah.
Mike, can you define what interpupillary distance is for me? Because I'm not absolutely sure I understand it.
Oh, it's, so you'll see it in the binocular specs, but it's kind of hidden. But for me, it's kind of important. It's the distance in millimeters between your two pupils.
Okay, because my binoculars adjust, and so
yeah, mine do too, but they don't go far
Not
enough.
enough.
really, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Because I've always
Not
been
enough.
impressed how my interpupillary distance is pretty small too, but my binoculars do accommodate my comfort level. So I've never run into that situation. That's a good one. I've never even looked at that spec when I've shopped for one.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I asked my optometrist about it too when I had glasses last time. She said, yeah, it's a little on the smaller side compared to average.
Yeah, so that good reason to shop around. And my guess is, like you said, you probably have to dig pretty deep into the specs to even find that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to, that's why I was wondering if anybody had any experience with a specific brand, but it sounds like not. My binoculars are Orion Ultra View, I think, and I love them, but yeah, it's it's hard to get a single image out of them for myself.
Yeah, and I know it's really frustrating when that distance is off, because every time I give mine to somebody else, they, you know, inevitably expand it. Like I have to readjust it for my own vision. And so, yeah, I can imagine being forced to look through a binocular that's not optimal is it's not a great viewing experience.
Okay, thanks.
I would mention also that one of the things when you're getting started, you should look at is some of the planetarium programs you can have on your computer or your phone or whatever. There are some good free ones. It's really nice to have something that you can carry with you in the field, and you can look at the sky and see what you're looking at. I have never had any luck at all with, my hands are way too shaky for the hold your phone up and it'll tell you what you're pointing at. It doesn't like it moving, but that's a really nice thing to have in the field with you.
Yeah, I personally have never taken a computer into the field with me because I stick with, you know, physical star charts. Now, if I'm going out to do my telescopic observing, oftentimes I'll just print a couple of star charts, custom print them before I go out because I know I'm going to look at a few select, you know, fields of view or something. But I've never liked using a laptop in the field because even with red light mode, and it's just too bright. And I hate having, you know, something that bright that I'm going between my telescope and the laptop and the telescope and the laptop. So I just stick with star charts. Old school.
Yep. Yeah, I have found the tablet that I take to be a real game changer for me. But the way my eyes are, regardless of what I use, I need more light when I read the chart that I would like. So I've just, and fortunately my eyes read dark adapt really quickly, but some sort of chart is a good thing to have.
I also really enjoyed with NeoWise. I had an adapter, was mainly for a telescope to put your smartphone on to take basic pictures without a expensive camera. It worked really well on my binoculars for NeoWise, much better than the telescope, of course, because you wanted to zoom out and get
Field of view.
Yeah.
So you got some good pictures.
Yeah, even just with a smartphone.
Oh, I haven't even seen it yet.
Well, NeoWise was last summer.
Yeah, this was the other.
Oh, NeoWise was last summer. I was thinking Leonard. NeoWise was lovely.
Yeah, we still have high hopes for Leonard, but it's probably not going to get as bright as NeoWise did.
And I'm thinking about, I think Sunday morning is looking promising, but whether I'm willing to get out of bed at 4 in the morning and stagger out and set up is another whole thing.
Just take your binoculars, Chris.
That's true.
It looks like Al put a question in the chat about parallelogram mounts, and I'm pretty sure there's at least one person here.
Anybody want to take that?
Oh, I have go ahead.
No, you go ahead because I haven't had one. So.
Oh, I've got the Orion parallelogram mounts, but Jordan has a parallelogram mount that is superior to the Orion that I have, and I wish he was here now because he could elaborate on the differences between the advantage that the parallelogram mount that Jordan has, and mine's an Orion. And I wish I knew the manufacturer. The advantage to his parallelogram mount is with the Orion, the mount is in front of you, and you swing the binocs up and down, and you can use them at a star party, and you can, a lot of people can view things quickly. But the new ones that are, I've seen these online also. I don't know what they are, but the new one that Jordan has purchased, the camera actually, the glasses are off to the side, so the parallelogram is set up to the side of you, and when you use the parallelogram mount, the glasses swing up and down this way, so it's a less encumbrance on your body, and it's just out of your way. It's just kind of out of the the viewing area that you want to use. Now, I'll see if I can find, well, why don't you just go ahead. Anyway, I really like parallelogram mounts. They're they're so stable. If I set up, like, I've been looking for Leonard also, and I can set my parallelogram mount up on a balcony over the front door, even though there's a city light. If I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, I can go out, I can take my binoculars from the bedroom, walk out to the balcony, hook up the binoculars to the parallelogram mount, look at Sky Safari, and know precisely where to look. And so it's just, and then your glasses are really stable. They're really in place, and you can really just spend letting your eyes really adjust to the morning sky in order to see. And I find them really helpful. I really like them. But I have friends that are with me in some dark skies from time to time, and when you have the parallelogram mount set up and you've got several people that want to view, you can have a kid there that's 4 feet tall, and you could get something on the glasses and swing it down to him, and he's going to see exactly what you're seeing at your level. They're really well worth the money. I mean, it's not, I think the Orion parallelogram mount that I have in the tripod probably sell for right around $300, probably less. And,
I think it's a little under. I just looked at them
yeah,
a few months ago.
and
About 280, I want to say.
yeah, maybe, yeah, probably. And there again, eBay is, if you look at eBay, you might find them. The only problem that I have with eBay is you always have to pay the postage. So a lot of times, if it's a little bit more expensive from one of the other, like Amazon in particular, if you buy something from them, oftentimes there's no charge at all in for the shipping. So even if you pay a few dollars more on Amazon, you know, I don't know, the shipping is.
Yeah, Steve, I fully agree with you. I don't own a parallelogram myself, but I've used them many times. I'm a huge fan, mainly for the last reason that you said, is because once you point them at an object, swiveling up and down preserves the pointing very well. So adults can look, then kids can look, and then adults can look again. And it's just, I mean, they are superb and well worth the extra expense.
And what's really nice about them also, if you have a good moon chart and you really want to learn the moon, and you get them so stable, and you get the moon is I mean, the moon is really a wonderful thing to look at, and just to know the really major areas of the moon, and being really comfortable when you're viewing, standing up straight, sitting up straight, and getting a chart in front of you that you can start really looking at different areas of things in the sky. It's I mean, I can spend hours with a decent pair of binoculars in the parallelogram mountain. You just observe it. The problem is, obviously, you want to get a better telescope, because you look at the night sky and you say, wow, I'm here now, but everything has its advantage and its cost.
Yeah. Hey,
John,
Al,
did you get the email I sent you? I just sent you an email.
no, I don't have an email window open right now, but I'll take a look.
Oh, darn.
Hey, I wanted to go back to.
I've got one other thing I want to bring up.
Well, hold on. Let's finish Al's question first. Al, do
Okay.
you have any specific questions about parallelograms that you wanna throw in? And Al, you can either unmute or you can use the message window, but whatever.
Can I throw in a quick comment?
Yeah.
Les Phelps made a parallelogram mount and donated it to the club. And I think it's sitting out in the clubhouse. If you want to go try it, just take it out. It's got wooden triangles and bolts and everything. And I think it works quite well.
It does. I've used it, yeah. It's pretty
Okay.
decent.
Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Sky and Telescope carried an article on the Omegon. It's OMEGON wide field opera glasses. They're 2.1 by 42 power.
Wow.
And yeah, and I think Santa Claus is going to bring these to me. He hasn't yet, but according to the article in Sky and Telescope, and I should have posted this on the email to the observers group. The claim that the article in Sky and Telescope is they're really great for city viewing because you see the entire constellation, even if you're in the city. It's not cutting through the city lights, but if you realize with an extra just 2 power binocular, you're actually twice as close as you would be. So if you have these 2 power wide field binoculars and you're looking at something, I guess like an indistinct constellation like Orpheus, if you had the entire constellation in front of you, and then to look at the serpents that are on both sides of the constellation, if you would swing these things over in the city, I think you can see. My question if anybody has opera glasses to use, because in the city, if you have these things and you want to look at the constellations that you'd really have to see in a dark sky, apparently these things will enhance your city viewing in the backyard. I was wondering if anybody had opera glasses. And then opera glasses, I mean, if you went to a Brewers game or a football game or whatever, and you just had them up on you could just use, I mean, a lot of telescope binocular people that I see birding, they just have a pole. I mean, they have a
Monopod.
pole.
A monopod.
It's not even a tripod. What is it? So what is it called?
Monopod.
Monopod. Yeah, in these 2-power binoculars, in a monopod at a baseball game or at a football game, I mean, you're right. I don't think it's a waste of money to have something like this. These are a little expensive. They're $140, but I think it's worth it.
I've never heard of them. I mean, I've heard of opera glasses, but I've never heard of anything like this. I'm already a big fan because that's why I love to use my binoculars at really dark sites. I just like to pan around the Milky Way. I'm just imagining panning around the Milky Way with a 2 by 42, where you can see.
I sent you the article. I should have posted it. I really should have posted and posed the question. I mean,
when $140 sounds pretty affordable to me, and I'm kind of wondering about Santa Claus at my house this year now.
Has anyone looked at what's referred to as the apparent view in binoculars or in telescopes? There's this article in Sky and Telescope on what they refer to as an apparent view, where not all 10 power. I mean, if something's at 60 power or 80 power, it's actually how much light is falling on your pupil that gives you a better, clearer view of the object that you're looking at. I can't really I don't have the difference between an apparent view and it seems like an apparent view is there's more light falling on your pupil.
Yeah, I can't claim to fully understand all of, I mean, I think I understand it the concept, but I'm not sure that I understand all the nuances, and I'm not sure that I would get all the terminology right. So I would defer to Dan or Al or Chris or somebody else, before I take a shot at that.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't understand it. I will say I have these. I don't have opera glasses, but I have these. They're little Nikons. They're 10 by 25, 5 degree, and they're kind of nice. I don't use them much for astronomy, but I have done it. It gives you a nice big view.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had them so long, I have no idea what they cost anymore.
Right.
You don't want to know how many pair of binoculars I have.
Dan Strom or anybody else, do you guys want to take a shot at Steve's question about apparent versus actual view?
I probably don't understand it exactly. I think it's just the magnified view that you see inside the binoculars, as though you were 20 times closer than you actually are.
I think what I should do is find the article in Sky and Telescope. And I've now that I subscribe to Sky and Telescope, I'm finding that if I bring up I can bring up all of their publications for like 12 months of the year, and then do a search on all 12. If I search on apparent view of the monthly telescopes, it'll find the article for me, and I could post it on our observer's website. I should post the thing on the Omicron, the 2.1 42 power binoculars also.
Well, Steve,
John, you have the article, so if you want to post it, that'd be great too.
Okay.
I sent it to you.
Let me take a shot at your apparent view question. I've usually heard it referred to as apparent field of view.
Okay.
So there could be some other concept there that I'm not aware of, but here's how my limited understanding, goes. Binoculars, take light in the aperture end and exit the light out the eyepiece end. And at the eyepiece end, there is what's called a pupil diameter of
Correct.
the width in millimeters of the beam of light that's then coming into your eye. And of course, how the pupil of your eye can only open so far. Oftentimes the exit pupil of the binocular is bigger than your pupil diameter. And that's what gives the discrepancy between field of view and apparent field of view, because what happens is when you're looking into your binoculars, you have to pan your eyes around to see everything. And so if your binoculars give you a field of view that is, say, 10 degrees wide, effectively your eyes can't see that whole 10 degrees. You have to pan around so that you're seeing it. So there is a discrepancy between actual field of view and the apparent field of view of your binoculars, the apparent being smaller. Then there's also the issue of light gathering, which you alluded to, and that figures into it as well. But that's my understanding of what the apparent field of view is.
I'll find the article in Sky and Telescope and throw it out there. I think that's exactly it. They really, Sky and Telescope actually recommends if you're going to buy binoculars, try to find the apparent field of view and get the highest apparent field of view that you can get. You're going to be more comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I would imagine with those opera glasses that you're referring to, there's going to be quite a discrepancy between the field of view and the apparent field of view, because when you hold those babies up to your eyes, you are going to be, without moving the opera glasses, you are going to be practically having to move your head to take in what is going to be an astoundingly, satisfyingly wide field of view.
And I think I would think that those small glasses, a good pair of opera glasses, at a star party or on Monona Terrace, where, because I've been on Monona Terrace and you try to point out the Big Dipper, it's hard to, you can't, depending on the night, it's difficult to find the Big Dipper, but because of the city lights. But if you've got something that can, if you've got these extra 2 power that you have set up like on a viewing tripod, you know, kids or anybody would look at it and you'd see, you know, instantly see the entire Big Dipper. Where I've struggled at Monona Terrace at night where I've been frustrated because you can't see the constellations as well as you want to look at them, you know?
Yeah. Another useful tool for that is the green laser pointer, where you can actually point to things, but you know, you get a couple of dozen of those going on Monona Terrace rooftop all at the same time. You'll be landing airplanes on Martin Luther King Boulevard.
Oh, that sounds like
Don't want to
fun.
do that. Not a good idea.
Steve, I have a quick question. Do
Yeah.
I remember right? Do you have 11-inch Star Master?
No, I do not.
Okay, I thought it was you. It must be someone else.
The only telescope I have is 60 millimeter. It's ETX. It's the 60 millimeter
Mead.
Mead ETX. Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason I'd like to get a little bit bigger telescope, but the only reason I like to use it is it's so portable, and I have a trailer up in northern Wisconsin, and so when I'm there, I really want. And this little ETX is so handy when you're there, particularly if you want with my binocs, for instance, you can't see the crescent on Venus. But the 60 miller ETX, when you just set it up real quickly, if there's anybody with you and you can see Venus, you can see the crescent really well. Yeah. You know, it's so simple to set up. It's fast, simple, and my wife has a Nikon camera, and it'll carry the Nikon as well if I lock things in place. So it's not great, but it's fun.
It works.
It works, yeah.
Keith, Al, and Amber, you guys want to finish us up here with any other questions? If not, we're probably going to wrap it up here in just a couple of more minutes. I'm surprised that the astrophotography group ended up carrying the night. They've got 12 in, now just 10, but they had 12 in there, and we ended up being the smaller group. I thought it would be the opposite. Well, I hope you guys have a chance to get out and take a look at Leonard in the next week or two.
We'll see if I can drag myself out Sunday morning.
It's going to be gone the 12th.
Decent. Huh?
It's going to be gone the 12th, and then it goes around the sun, and then it comes back up. We should see it again the 14th. So
okay.
12th, 13th.
But in the evening, right?
In the evening, right.
That's more doable.
John, there's another thing I was going to send you an email. If you look at the path of Leonard, it appears, now I haven't taken my cell phone and a compass over there, but it appears that Leonard would be very easy to get behind the Capitol, and right next, it's going to be going right into the Capitol dome from the little I can see of its path.
From the location that you and I have talked about up at the bike path?
No, actually, I'm not sure of the location because I haven't really done any measurements yet, but I think from the Tenny Park locks, there's a breakwater that goes out into Lake Mendota, And you know where the Tenny Park locks are, where the Yahara River goes into Lake Monona. I mean, where the Yahara River exits from Lake Mendota. The locks there.
Yeah.
There's a breakwater that goes straight out into Lake Mendota, and from what I'm seeing, when Leonard gets, I would think about the 16th or the 18th. I would think the 18th or the 20th of December, it should be going right into the Capitol Dome, I think.
Well, that may be true. Location obviously is everything. You have to pin the location down very exactly.
Right.
But
Right.
Leonard is not really expected to get above naked eye visibility either.
Right.
So, photographing anything beside the Capitol that's not naked eye visibility, in my estimation, would be a losing proposition. Because
Okay. Very
if you
good.
have to use
Very
a
good.
long enough exposure to bring something, out of the murk,
Right.
the Capitol is going to be very difficult to contend with as far as brightness goes.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if I would spend the time going
yeah,
to someplace to try to get
right.
that shot with Leonard. I would have done it with Neowise. In fact, I did get a shot of Neowise over the skyline of Madison, but Leonard might be tough.